Hello and welcome to the program. I am Folashade Ogurinde. For the ninth straight month, Nigeria's inflation rate has seen a steady rise. In the month of October, the Consumer Price Index, according to the National Bureau of Statistics (NBS), accelerated to 21.09%, marking a 0.32 percentage points increase from 20.77% recorded in September. This is coming as food inflation in October 2022 also increased to 23.72% from 18.34% in the corresponding month last year. According to the NBS, the possible factors responsible for the increase include disruption in the supply of food products, increase in the cost of importation due to the persistent currency depreciation, and the general increase in the cost of production. For more insight into this development, I'm joined now by Gospel Obele, the CEO and Chief Economist at Streetnomics Limited. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, what do you make of the latest inflation rate of 21.09%?
Yes, thank you so much for having me once again. Yes, so I'm not surprised that inflation has risen in Nigeria. It's largely expected due to the series of events, both internally in terms of policies that has been rolled out, also within the context of where the country is right now, the political tensions in view and all that. Then looking more externally, you're talking about the geopolitics of things, the Russian-Ukraine war, and as well as post-COVID-19 supply chain recovery dynamics as well, and the climate change economics or the climate change narrative. The gist is that all of these different buckets of events, internally and externally, have shaped where we are as an economy, such that we are crippled more vulnerably and we are open or susceptible to rising costs of living or inflationary impact, as it were. More recently as well, in the Nigerian economy, we're seeing that the flood has hit, and what this flood simply means is a possible rise in inventory stock by suppliers of food or those who are responsible for farm to market. And taking also into consideration that the Christmas period is around the corner, plus the fact that Q1 is going to be heavy on elections, it's really, really a call for worry what the future is in terms of the cost of living crisis, or if at all that inflationary impact burden heavily on food or energy prices on the average Nigerian will fizzle out soon.
Now, how do you think the CBN will react to this rise in inflation, especially as regards interest rates?
Well, I would expect that the CBN would still largely remain conventional in its approach. And that's because just for some reasons, central banks are being conventional across board globally, raising interest rates and all that, which is necessarily not bad. It's a necessary condition to sort of try to reduce the inflationary numbers or the inflationary impact on the economy. But the nature of inflation we are dealing with is a bit non-monetary and largely unconventional as well. So meaning that it's going to require more than just interest rates, to help us really beat down or solve this inflationary menace that we face. Let's not forget that the rise in inflation is also leading some form of cost of living crisis owing to the pressure points, food, energy, and these pressure points are redefining cost of living, in terms of increased cost of living and all that. So the central bank is likely going to do more increase in the interest rates, as in terms of following the bandwagon. And what we've seen is that central banks are leaning towards protecting financial markets more than the real economy. It's looking as though there is a trade-off between the financial markets and real economy. The real economy is now much more open to a worsening cost of borrowing conversation, which also permeates into cost of doing business and cost of product, services, and the like. So I do not think that interest rates as a standalone are sufficient, in as much as, yes, they could be necessary as a good approach, but they are not sufficient within the context of the inflationary construct we're dealing with now in the times we live in.
Now, it appears rising inflation is not just a Nigerian thing, as global economies such as the UK are experiencing the same.
Yes, I agree. It's not a rising. Yes, I agree. It's not a Nigerian conversation. It's a global conversation. And to a very large extent, I think that the world has been a bit laid back, or institutional leaders have been a bit laid back in terms of watching interest rates rise. I also think that the era of interpreting the inflation we deal with, what I meant to say was that since the pandemic, we realized that factors outside non-economic variables, largely have a huge potential of shaping economic variables. And I think that's one major lesson of the post-pandemic or the pandemic period that a lot of institutional leaders never learned, even up until now. So meaning that the construct of the inflation we're dealing with right now is global. And it's global because you have a strong geopolitics conversation between Russia and Ukraine, on that table. You have evolving climate change crisis, which is a very serious problem. I mean, Vietnam is facing a lot around soya bean production. The geopolitical crises are impacting on grain production and a lot of sunflower oil and a lot of raw materials, and all that. All of these dynamics have impacted heavily on global supply chain and access to market. And that's impacting heavily on, food and energy prices and the like. So yes, it's a global challenge, but I believe that central banks, in partnership, more importantly, with fiscal authorities, need to begin to think of more non-conventional but clusterized approach, to dealing on a sufficient bit, to solving inflation as a problem that has risen within the times we are in. The era of allowing central banks just raise the interest rates without any collaborative approach on the fiscal side, especially being intertwined with what the central or monetary institution is doing. The era of just working separately would not yield any result. In fact, it's going to worsen the situation more because with your actions or inactions also come perceived or actual uncertainties on the economy, and investors, the real sector, and different players always act accordingly. So there is need for that collaboration across board, across nations of the earth, across institutional leaders in different contexts, and a lot more maturity a lot more maturity and rising up to address the major issues that are threatening global prosperity and growth, especially inclusive growth in the times we live in.
Definitely, it's impossible to talk about food inflation without touching on flooding. How significant will this year's flooding be on food prices in the coming months?
It's going to worsen, and that's not a good news, really. It's going to worsen. It's going to worsen because we are also not paying attention to what's happening, or we don't really understand or haven't properly interpreted what's happening. Food inflation is a major part of, this whole conversation. And that has been the most consistent penetration point of increased cost of living for the average, Nigerian, even globally, across board. And what that is also bringing to us is it's redefining, the state of prosperity, is redefining what we term as newer levels of poverty traps. Even if people earn more money or they have more cash, that disposable income or the disposable spend is being shrinked because the cost of living or the cost of getting the basic necessities are being hijacked every day. And with the flood crisis in Nigeria, what that simply means is that the supply chains have been further broken or arrested. And because we've not had that visionary leadership to begin to lead efficient food security systems, good storage systems and all that, there's a huge gap that is available. And because nature abhors vacuum, that would be reflected in increased prices of goods and services, both in the market as at now, plus the fact that inventory stock will also increase and will also lead to further increases in the future, as there'll be concerns around harvesting crops and all of that when the time is due, next year and all that. So the ripple effects of the flood or climate change economics in this conversation cannot be estimated as at now, because one is still a developing story, but we know for sure that the price of food is going to go high, and the price of food goes high. A lot of people, especially Nigerians, are going to be poorer, especially Africans, are going to be poorer for it because they may not be able to afford the basic 3 square meals at the nutritional levels they need for their growth and human productivity.
Well, indeed, Gospel Obele, the CEO and Chief Economist at Streetnomics Limited, thank you very much for your time and your contribution on the program.
Thank you for having me, Folashade.
Well, we'll take a break here, but Money Matters returns shortly. To stay with us. Welcome back to the program. On its launch in late October 2021, Nigeria became the first country in Africa to enable the use of a legal tender digital currency for daily financial transactions. Despite having a year to promote and encourage the adoption of the CBDC, a Bloomberg report found that less than 0.5% of Nigerians are using the digital currency. This means that less than 1 in 200 people in Nigeria are active users of the e-Naira. During a ceremony held by Nigeria Central Bank to celebrate 1 year of the e-Naira, its governor, Godwin Emefiele, explained that e-Naira has recorded around 700,000 transactions worth over 8 billion naira. Now, despite the seemingly positive statistics, reports show that around 1 million Nigerians had downloaded the e-Naira digital wallet. This suggests that over 300,000 wallets have been opened but are not in use. Now, to speak more on this, Sam Chidoka, the Managing Director and CEO Kairos Capital Limited, joins me now. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, the e-Naira has marked its first anniversary. How would you rate Africa's first digital currency 1 year after its launch?
Okay, thanks for having me. I think that in terms of the e-Naira, digital coins and digital system of payments is the way to go. The cashless economy is the way to go, is the way of the future, is the way of today and tomorrow. Cash itself, in terms of when we spend our money in cash, is difficult to maintain. If CBN spends a lot of money producing cash, so the digital currency is the way to go. However, with the e-Naira, we haven't seen the type of surge in transactions that we expected to see. The report we saw shows that about 8 billion naira worth of transactions have been done in the e-Naira. But if you compare that with the reports we have from NIBSS records that between January and August 2022, there was a transaction value of over 200 trillion naira on their e-platforms. So whether it's by bank transfer or NIP transfer or mobile transfers, over 200 trillion naira worth of transactions has been done just in about 7 to 8 months. So that shows you that the e-Naira, when compared to other forms of banking transaction, is lagging behind. However, it's a step in the right direction. And if we combine what the e-Naira is doing and other digital forms, it continues to enhance the possibility of a digital economy and a cashless economy, which is, I believe, is the way to go.
It appears that there is a lag in acceptance and usage of e-Naira in Nigeria. What factors do you think are responsible for this?
So again, I think that we have sort of overgrown the e-Naira as a country. It's just like if you remember, some people tried to initiate mobile money in Nigeria, and it hasn't quite gotten the traction that mobile money got in a place like Kenya when you have the M-Pesa, right? Because in Nigeria, most banks have a banking app, and just on your phone, you can do transactions. So why do you want to switch it for another means of transaction, right? Because most people can very conveniently make transfers, receive monies, pay for products and services using their banking app that is on their phone, right? Or on the mobile app that is on their tablets or on their laptop. It's difficult to begin to unlearn that and try another system. So e-Naira is competing with other forms of digital payments, right? And it's difficult to change when people have gotten used to a system of payment.
You recall that part of the motive for the e-Naira was to serve as an alternative to other digital currencies such as cryptocurrency, which the CBN is, of course, not in support of.
Well, if that was the motive, if that was the drive to create an alternative to cryptocurrency, then we can say that it hasn't achieved that, because if you look at the volumes still being traded in those coins and cryptos, it hasn't quite abated in any form or shape. Even when people have taken some losses, because in recent past, some of those currencies have taken a beating, right? But yet people are trading in those currencies. So in terms of that, the e-Naira hasn't quite achieved that. I do not think that the e-Naira will be able to replace those other digital currencies in terms of cryptos, because remember that the cryptocurrencies are way beyond Nigeria. In terms of volumes being traded, those volumes are much higher. In terms of peer-to-peer transactions in terms of counterparties. You're trading with counterparties across the world, but the e-Naira is basically, at the moment, limited to our geographical construct at the moment. It's supposed to be a currency, a form of digital form that should transverse the geography of Nigeria, but it hasn't quite achieved that. So I do not think that it will overshadow digital currencies in terms of cryptos in any time soon.
Projecting into the future now, do you see the e-Naira gaining traction among Nigerians?
Well, I can't see it, to be honest. I think that, like anything, it will grow on some people. Some people will use it more than others will. The volumes will inch up a bit. But when you're going to compare that 8 billion naira to trillions of naira in terms of 200 trillion naira being done in 8 months using other digital forms, it's going to be quite a challenge. So those who use it will continue to use it. Some people will still experiment with it and just want to know what it is about. But on a whole, I think that if you look at the whole digital currency space, whether it is e-Naira, whether it is transfer using USSD, whether it is banking using a banking app or your mobile app and all of that, or under your mobile platform, those things will continue to grow. As those continue to grow, reliance on cash transactions should naturally reduce, especially when you add POS transactions as well, and we're growing in number of merchants and all of that. So cumulatively, the digital space will grow. In that space, I think the e-Naira will still struggle a bit.
Well, Sam Chidoka, Managing Director and CEO, Kairos Capital Limited, thank you very much for your time and your contribution. And it's a wrap on the program. See you again next time. I am Folashade Ogurinde. Bye for now.